yeah, if you don't know, you can check out any of our streams. Me and Phoenix got to play the game Returnal throughout the week, and we also played a bit of the Ascension DLC that had come out. Um, so I'm gonna go ahead and get right into it. Phoenix had been talking this game up. I think you said it was one of your favorite games you had
Okay,
played in the
so
last 5 to 10.
I I mean, the more I play it, the more I like it. I think my stance on it, whenever anybody brought up anything, especially with the PS5, I was always like, "That's the best game on the
Hmm.
PS5," and I still believe that. Granted, it's a pretty small library, so it's not a lot
Oh,
of competition there in general.
I just want to throw in real quick. There will be spoilers, and I feel like this is a game where spoilers are very important. I feel like,
Maybe. I think it depends. It depends, like what you're
yeah,
playing this game for. Like you could know all about the story and still, love the game based upon the gameplay. But still, yes,
but
spoilers.
so it's interesting because I felt like taking away from this game, you liked the gameplay aspects a little bit more than me, and I actually liked more the themes and the plot
Hmm.
and all of that stuff a little bit more. Or I feel like you enjoyed that just as much as me, but I felt like that was my main takeaway from all of that.
Right. Well, why don't you go ahead and kind of give your. I mean, it doesn't be a full review,
Overall.
but your feelings on it. You can walk through stuff. We can break down, by
Mhm.
categories of the game if you want. But yeah, I want to know where you stand on it before I kind of hop in and gloat about it for the next 10 hours.
Well, I feel like my favorite aspects of the game were definitely the plot elements, the themes, the spoilers. Um, I don't know if you've known, but I've always been a huge fan of like Greek mythology. I've read Dante's Inferno. I don't. I was gonna say the Divine Commedia, but I feel like the Divine Commedia is all of those books, and so I would
Hmm.
just say I've only read Dante's Inferno. So I actually very much enjoy kind of dark and dour kind of stories of people going through attrition and going through all sorts of like things like that. So this story for me really kind of connected, and I found myself really enjoying it. Now I will say I didn't initially, but there was a particular. I should have looked at the video, but there's a particular video you sent me
Yeah.
of a guy talking about. I think it said something about Returnal as a story of hell or something
Right.
like that.
Well, he framed it, and it was even a little different. I know we're kind of hopping over into the narrative side
I
pretty
just went
quick.
straight to what my favorite
Yeah,
part
no,
was.
and
Yeah.
that's fair. But he made the analogy comparing it to the story slash game from I think it was like the story was like in the mid '60s, and the game, of course, was probably early '90s. But what was it?
It was
I have no
I have
mouth and I
a
can
mouth I
and
can't
I must
yell or
scream.
something. Yeah. Well, it's a story. I thought it was a book.
It was a book first, and then they made a game adaptation about it
Oh, okay.
X amount of time later. So yeah, I have no mouth and I must scream, which is just
Hmm.
it's a really just it's a downer. I think most people say it's like the most depressing story that you could make because I mean, as a real quick kind of premise for anybody who's interested in that story, it's basically about an AI that takes over the world and then destroys humanity, not
Keeps five
because
humans though to like entertain itself.
yeah, it's weird because like it's not like your standard like Skynet takeover story where they just got too smart and they logically decided humans are bad. They did this computer just literally hated humanity, so he got rid of humanity out of spite, and then kept a few just to torture and entertain himself. And there's more to it than that, but basically these five humans are put through literal hell, and there's no way for them to
Hmm.
escape until
And
the.
basically, or sorry, good.
No, go ahead.
No, as I say, the main guy, one of the five, he
Hmm.
kills the other four
Yeah, to help
simply
them
to spite
escape.
the AI. Yeah, to help them escape or to spite the machine or whatever, and then it shuts his mouth or something.
it
I
makes
don't know.
it it basically makes it where then he can't like try to off himself or anything, so he
Hmm.
can't escape. It, like deforms him so he can't do any bodily harm. It closes his mouth off so he can't speak. Like it's just horrible story. So I
Terrible
mean,
stuff. Yeah.
if you're not into that, by all means, please don't get yourself depressed by
That's not
reading this story.
Returnal, but
Well, the whole
Returnal's
point
not.
is that you're
It's not
trapped in
pleasant.
a hell of your own, whether it be your
Hmm.
own creation or in this, kind of external situation the AI put him through. But that's kind of the premise of Returnal. You're trapped in basically this hellscape that you can't
Hmm.
get out of. So I'll let you kind of take more of that. I know we kind of
Yeah,
sidebarred a little bit.
and I actually really like how even from the very beginning of the game throughout, every single plot element that you see is always a reference to something that happens at this one particular event at the latter end of her life. Or we're assuming what happens at the latter end of her life. Like she lands on this planet and she begins looking for something called the White Shadow, which is like this signal, this like relay signal asking for help, or I don't even know if it's asking for help, but it's some sort of signal that she feels compelled to
Right.
follow. And as it turns out, the White Shadow is, what is it? The shadow of the moon from this.
That's what
It all,
that one video said, and that might be a reach. It's kind of hard to say exactly.
well, there was another reference that the White Shadow could be the white lines on the road as she's driving. I think the daughter, or I don't think we ever found out if it was a daughter or son,
Pretty sure it's supposed to be the
but
sun. But that's honestly kind of hitting on something that's cool about this story that I know you may not have liked at first, but I like. It's the narrative of this game, although it has a story, and there's definitely things that, it's trying to say happened in a certain way. It's pretty open ended, though, at a very certain point. Like,
you
things
can
are kind of.
interpret anything. Yeah.
I mean, things are a little ambiguous. I mean, it's kind of mixing with reality versus the psyche of your main character, Celine. And since this whole thing's being told from her perspective, it's kind of hard to know what's real, what's not real. And there's a lot of debate about it online, which I like. I know some people don't like narratives that aren't super definitive. Like most people like a story that has a really clear beginning, middle, end, and it's just really straightforward and expository.
I
I
come
like
from
it
the
when they're
world of
left in.
I say I come from the world of reading Stephen King books, so I very much, no one ever knows what the heck's really happening
Yeah,
in
I
a
mean, it's
Stephen
fun.
King
I mean,
book.
it'd be one thing if it was weird and ambiguous, and it was you couldn't have any idea what was going on. It was just kind of way off the wall. But this, I was gonna say movie, this game, although it's like that, it's structured enough that it's telling a pretty, I think, concise story. You definitely have themes and stuff it's pulling from, but it leaves room for theory crafting and discussion, which I think is fun. It makes you think about this game well past, the ending credits, and it just kind of keeps, staying in your, at least my recollection, pretty consistently.
Hmm. And it does a bunch of things to kind of get across the connective tissues between what happens in the event and what's happening in the game. I
Hmm.
mean, every time you reach a boss, like that boss represents. It
Something
seems
in
like
her
that boss
life.
has like some sort of representation. Like one plays a song that you don't know why the song plays Fear the like a version of Fear the Reaper by the Blue Oyster Cult, and like that whole song has a tie into her, and then
Her
the
father.
end boss.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just everything. I didn't really see what the connective tissue of some of the bosses were. What is it? The first one was it
Frike.
Crike? Frike?
Yeah, I've heard different pronunciations. I think it's supposed to be Frike, not Frikey, but people pronounce it a little bit differently. And just to frame it, because I know we've kind of jumped around a little bit. In case you're not familiar with the narrative of Returnal, I'll give, if you want, I can give kind of the quick little
No, go ahead.
synopsis of
Oh,
it.
mhm.
At least the initial premise is, and I think you mentioned when we first talked about it. Celine's an astronaut in a program, crash lands on this weird
Mm,
planet, and she's trying to figure out how to escape. But every time she dies, she starts over at the beginning where her ship crashed. So that's the gameplay mechanic too. Is you roguelike structure, keep going through from the beginning to the end, trying to get through it, and you progress through, try to get to this white shadow signal that you mentioned to try to
mhm.
escape. So
What
you, oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, what roguelikes can you think of? I mean, obviously one that came to mind was Hades. I haven't played too many. I mean, I guess I had heard some people compared it to what was the Dead Fetus game?
Oh,
Fetus in the
Binding of
Basement.
Isaac.
Binding of Isaac. I heard some people compare it to that. I'm not quite sure what else you could compare it
Here's
to.
the thing, like it's a roguelike, but kind of I don't want to say it's loosely a roguelike. I mean it is a roguelike, but I think you do this game and other games kind of a disservice if you compare it too closely. Like comparing
Hmm.
this game to Hades, I think is setting this game up for failure. Not that this game is I love this game, but Hades is
I
so
liked it.
good.
It's good. Hades
Um
is like one of my favorite games, like
Yeah,
the last
and
5 years.
that's a whole nother conversation, like why that's such a good game. This game borrows, the structure of the fact that you repeat, various gameplay elements, like you run through certain rooms, try to get to certain locations, and then you repeat that process. And if you die, you have to start over. But that's
Hmm.
really the extent of its roguelike nature. The gameplay aspect of this is pretty unique. But I'll tell you, before we get that far, because that's kind of shifting us over into a different topic,
Hmm.
I just want to mention the last kind of half of the narrative. And this will kind of tie into
Yes.
that story
Mhm.
that we mentioned. So The whole kind of catch here is when she finally does get to the end of this, she escapes, or she thinks she escapes, or whatever. It through flashbacks is kind of revealed that there was stuff that happened prior to any of this stuff. She had been denied being let into this certain space program. There's a whole bunch of issues with the mother, et cetera, et cetera. But kind of
You
the
find out all of this stuff though by like going through an ominous house.
yeah.
It's a representation of her house back on Earth, which I always thought those were all really cool sections where you would you kind of learn about all that stuff.
Yeah, and that's kind of nice thing. Like, well, nice thing in some ways. A lot of these little tidbits, you get what's the best way to say this? You get out of this game what you put into it as far as looking at the lore. Like
Hmm.
at face value, you get a really surface level understanding of what the backstory is of Celine. But if you take a little bit and you read like all the notes in her house and you look at the audio logs and all this kind of stuff, it pieces together a bigger story. So whole thing basically back on Earth before any of this happened, she crashes, kind of veers off a bridge, lands into this river, creek, whatever. Her child dies in the process, and she's kind of ripped away from it. That's kind of where they leave it at. So the whole structure here is basically, and you kind of see this, especially as you get into the second half of the game. The game starts having imagery and whatnot from Celine's real life interject with this alien world, which is kind of
Hmm.
pretty uncanny because like she's seeing toys from her childhood or her son's childhood pop up in inside the game space. Of course, the house keeps popping up. Her car's there at a certain point. So
Hmm.
basically, you start getting the understanding that what you're seeing is not really what's happening, and the whole assumption here is that she's trapped in her own hell, essentially. Like, some people have argued that she died in that car crash and she's in a purgatory or she's in hell. The other argument is she's in a coma or she's paralyzed and is guilt ridden about what happened to her child, and she's reliving this story, but through this analogy of being trapped on this alien planet. So it's a pretty dire or dour story. It's definitely a downer in most ways, but
What I thought it could have been was like a sort of, because throughout the game they throw out many like Greek mythology type wording out at you
mm,
through like some of the books and some of the stuff you take in. So I almost wonder if it was just if it is a form of maybe like Greek mythological limbo of some sort. Because when you read the books, although that those tie-ins could just be, I think they throw out a lot of those words just in science space talk anyways. Like if you in NASA, so it could just be that connective
well,
tissue. I
they
mean,
do talk a
who knows?
lot about like was it the is it seven rings, nine rings of hell?
Something like that. I
Something like
can't
that.
remember.
So they do have a lot of allegories to purgatory and hell, and of course Greek gods and characters that reflect certain characters in the game. Like Helios is pretty
Hmm.
sure it's a Greek character. So is Selene.
It
So
is.
is Phrike and Anthropos and all this stuff. So there's
Mhm.
extra meaning there. That's what I'm getting at. Is you get out of the game what you put into it. You take the time to go research all that mythology and the characters behind it. It recontextualizes what's going on in this story. So, I mean, we don't have to go too deep into it, but I think that's what I really like about this story. For one, I like, and it sounds like you like, kind of these, for lack of a better word, bummer stories in a way. Because I mean, they make you kind of feel something a little bit, which I like. But at the same time, it's very much open to exploration and kind of breaking down the story and doing your theory crafting and digging into it. There's a lot there, a lot of meat on the bones to kind of enjoy the narrative.
Yeah, I agree with you. I feel like I kind of like I just like stuff that makes you think.
Hmm.
I like stuff that makes you think, and honestly, I feel like that's what I kind of don't get out of. Well, we'll be moving into a Marvel movie here in a bit, but I feel like because we're coming off of watching a couple Marvel movies in a bit, and I feel like that's something I didn't get out of those movies. Is like I didn't walk away with questions. I didn't really walk away wondering like what did this mean? What did this mean? Like you kind of know what everything
Yeah.
means
To
and
be
where
fair
everything
though,
fits.
Marvel's never been a thought provoking. Like
I know.
you've always wondered like, oh, what if? Oh, what's gonna happen with these characters interacting? But it's never been like existential crisis kind of thing, or larger personal kind of revelations you have to kind of think through. It's
I
pretty
just
much been what you see is what you get.
I just mean, yeah, if you compare this, like, trying to remember a movie, like some crazy thought-provoking movie I've seen the last decade, but like, if I compare the movie Thor: Love and Thunder to the movie Arrival, I don't know if you ever got to
Yeah.
see that movie a few years ago. Like, that movie and what it goes through, and like all the ups and downs and where it ends up, it's just it's like this game. You can piece together as much as you want, but ultimately, it's just what do you think happened? And
Yeah.
I like that stuff. Just
And
fights.
to be fair, I mean, different movies for different purposes. Like, not every movie needs to be this super thought provoking thing. It can just be a
No, I
fun
get
pot.
it.
And same thing with games, too. Not every game has to have
Hmm.
this super, intriguing, thought provoking narrative. But I liked that this game have it. I think partially because this game didn't need to have it. Like, the gameplay, in my opinion, is solid enough. It could have held up the game. Most people could have praised the game just for that. But the fact that along with all these other great qualities about the game, they also invested in this really rich narrative. I think it paid off. And you can argue like what you like about the narrative or what direction you think the narrative should have taken, but a lot of effort, a lot of quality, and I think the way they display and kind of drip feed the narrative to you through all the different
Hmm.
elements in the game is fun. It's engaging.
And I think it's it's even more particularly interesting that like such a thought provoking and interesting game like this came from kind of I don't want to say upstart, but I believe House Marquee had been known for making very smaller shooter games. I guess they had been
So
making.
they've been
They
around
have
for a
like
long
over the
time.
top shooters, yeah.
Like I am hesitant to call them like a small studio or kind of like a low key underdog
I
studio or
haven't been
anything.
playing any B-roll. Oh, sheesh.
But I mean, they
This
started
Shaw's
out with
going all
like
fast.
Stardust and Super Stardust back in kind of like the 2000s and whatnot, and that evolved into I don't know if you ever played the game Resogun. Probably not, it was a PlayStation
That was their
exclusive.
biggest gun, right? That was a PlayStation
It was
3
probably their
game.
most popular one. It was a PS4 like launch title. So I think at the time that was kind of their big claim to fame. That was a fun game. I remember playing that when the PS4 first came out because I think it was like a PS Plus title. And then they did another game called Next Machina. Like they've done a lot, and all their games I think have always been pretty well critically acclaimed and of good quality. So
Hmm. This
this
game is
is
polished. This is a super
yeah,
polished game.
and that's I think the other thing I really liked about this game, like kind of shifting gears into another pillar of the game, like the performance, like across my time playing the game, I thought was really well. It plays well. It was pretty smooth across the board. There may have been a couple more hiccups when we got into like co-op. I definitely noticed some like little graphical hiccups where like UI and button prompts didn't show up, but I don't think I ever had a crash in this game. In very
I
little
can't remember any
situations.
hiccup.
Yeah, there might have been some frame drops when things get crazy, and this game gets crazy visually. And that's the thing too. Like, it's not like this game is, resting on its laurels or trying to, shoot for a low bar when it comes to graphics. Like, I know the B-roll you're looking at right now looks a little plain, but there's parts in this game where you got hundreds of, flying, glowing projectiles with their own, like movement and animation tracks, and then of course you have multiple characters and enemies across. Like, there's a lot going on pushing your system, and it holds up really well. I think the art style of this game
It was
is
beautiful.
awesome.
It's very much like kind of Geiger-ish, a
Yeah,
little
very
bit of
aliens.
alien type stuff in there, and trying to think of what else you could compare it to. I mean, I would Geiger is probably the best comparison.
Yeah, like
Yeah, I would just say that.
yeah, across the board, it's definitely got that weird, xenomorphic kind of alien design. Very, very alien, like very
Hmm.
unsettling. Almost body horror-ish with some of the alien designs. Like, look at that guy up there, and he's pretty messed up. Um, but I liked that. I mean, I thought the art design was so well detailed and so well realized, and they really pulled it off when it came to actually pull that in for the graphics of the game. Like the graphics
Hmm.
overall look good. Like you could
It
argue some
is.
of the models look a little rough if you get really close to them, but in motion and when you piece everything, like look at that boss on the screen. Like that looks like a huge Destiny raid boss or
Hmm.
something. You have all the particle effects going on.
Well, we mentioned that in our stream is that's one thing I really enjoyed about this game is a lot of the boss mechanics and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Some of those encounters for me felt very reminiscent of some of our Destiny encounters. I don't know, it kind of very much scratched that sort of itch of just like a all right, you go left, I stay right. We hit this point, jump, all this
And that's
type of.
actually something funny because I didn't feel like that when I played the game the first time because I played it solo. I wouldn't had there were
Hmm.
no like comparisons I would have ever made to Destiny after I played my first solo run through. But you're right, after playing it with somebody else, like this is a completely different gaming experience when you play co-op. And there is more of a strategic element to it, and kind of like how do you take down certain bosses. Even if you played the game before, like I was pleasantly surprised about how fresh my next run through of this game felt after I'd already played through it solo multiple times.
Hmm. And I will say, the first few streams I did of this game were solo.
Mm.
and I made some progress. I beat the first boss by myself, but I honestly feel like my score of this game went up when you joined in. I felt like it was more enjoyable, mainly because I'm not like a super sweaty, like I normally don't play super ridiculously hard
Hmm.
games, and I was having some trouble in those first few streams, but like when you came in, it made it slightly more easier. It made it slightly easier, but for the times that are difficult, I feel like it just to me it's more enjoyable just having someone there to, I guess, be in pain with you the whole time. I don't know.
It depends what you're looking for. Like I enjoyed playing this both ways. I really liked it solo.
Hmm.
In some ways, I liked it better because the game is definitely more tense that way. Like I think you get a better feel for what the game developers wanted you to feel out of the game, where you have kind of these really big moments. Because here's the thing: this game, from a tone standpoint, sets you up to being kind of this very solemn, isolated kind of situation. So you're already kind of unsettled because of that, and then you're working through, slowly progressing, knowing any moment you could die. Then when you get to one of these boss battles that you know are going to be a challenge, and you're like, all right, if I screw this up, I have to redo my last 2 hours of work. Like it's
Hmm.
some people hate that feeling because it's stressful to think, well, I'm going to waste my time, but I thought when you get to that moment, the tension's so high, like my blood was pumping there, like those were, I think, some of the more exhilarating, gaming moments I'd had in a while. And I'm usually not one to play a game for high level challenge, but it was the way you built to that challenge. If this game wouldn't have been a roguelike, I don't think I would have cared as much. Because, it'd be like, I don't know, a Dark Souls or something like that, where, you can get and kind of save before you get to a boss or you get to a certain point where you have like a checkpoint, and then you can just, beat your head against a wall until you beat them. This is
And I
not like that.
and I will say, as opposed to what my experience I had earlier in the year with
Mm,
horrible Elden Ring, I feel like the difficulty with this game, I think you mentioned it during our streams, but it is hard, but it feels like whenever there's a mistake or death that you have, it does feel avoidable. It feels like you're just like, oh, I jumped a little too early, or
yeah.
I wasn't keeping my eyes out on this red beam, coming at me. And it's like most of the time when you die in this game, it feels like it's your fault, and it feels earned, I guess, in a
It
way.
feels
I like playing.
fair.
Yeah, Elden Ring for me did not feel. It didn't feel like a fair. I don't know. That's just. Well, we'll get an Elden Ring, but yeah, for me at least, the difficulty here felt manageable,
Yeah.
and
And that's important. I mean, I can't, speak to Elden Ring. I didn't play that, but you never want to play a game where it's hard just for the sake of being hard. You feel like you've been, cheated out of, a death or
mhm.
something because the game just blindsided you with something. Like, think back to something like the old Call of Duty World at War, the veteran runs,
Mhm.
where you just be blindsided by an unavoidable grenade, and it's just literally there was nothing you can do. This game, there were a couple of times I feel like the game kind of blindsided me, but they were so rare, and even then I probably could have chalked it up to something I did to cause it. But for the most part, the game's always fair. You always have full control of your character. You never get locked into like your movement or anything. You can get out of something.
Mhm.
But anyway, I think the challenge was fair. I mean, some people aren't going to agree with that, and that's one thing that I can certainly sympathize with. Some people I think would really like this game, but they get stuck because of the difficulty, and there's
Oh.
no real way to get past that at a certain point. This is one downside I do think the game has. Like, if you think about other roguelikes, and once again I said we shouldn't compare to other roguelikes, but if you think about something like Hades, every run, no matter how far you get, you earn some level of meta progression, right? Like, you get, I
Mhm.
don't remember what it was in Hades, a little purple
Credit something,
whatever it was,
yeah.
where you could
Mhm.
buy basically some character attribute points and make yourself a little
Well,
bit
remember,
stronger.
remember in Hades, you would get boons, and whenever you would get further in the game, you were awarded boons, and then before your next run, you go to the little boon machine, and it had
Hmm.
all the different boons,
Yeah, and that's what I'm
and
getting at. I don't think they were the
yeah,
boons. The boons are the things the gods gave you, but they
that's what I
were like,
mean. Yeah, yeah.
but they give you like little, like you could earn little. I can't remember what they were called. Little purple, currency in the
Oh,
game,
I remember the thing you're talking
and you could
about. Yeah.
literally buy stats. Like you could
Hmm.
be a
Yeah.
little bit faster, a little bit this. So you always could slowly grow your character and be stronger. So the next time you did it, you were never starting back at ground zero. Returnal kind of does that, but not nearly as clearly and not nearly as helpfully, if that makes sense. Like on
Returnal, every run is its own thing, man. When you
well,
die, it
that's
feels.
true and that's not true. It depends on up to a certain point. Up until the first boss, you really aren't given much of anything. Like basically, the structure of this game, for those who haven't played it, after you beat one of the major bosses, of which there are 5 or 6 of them, depending on which route you take, you usually earn some kind of permanent unlockable. A lot of times for like traversal, like you get the grapple hook, you can go in water, and those actually have gameplay.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, ramifications down the line where you can avoid combat easier. They're
You
not
do
just
unlock new weapons, I guess, as you go through too,
and
as
that's what I'm
well.
getting at. The weapons end up being the meta progression, but it's hard to really feel that early in the game because if you keep beating your head against the wall, dying before you ever get through the first boss, that first biome only ever gives you a few guns. So you never get access to the more powerful tier guns to kind of add to the weapon pool. And you also don't get access to those permanent upgrades. So literally, when you start over, you're pretty much starting at square one. The only level of meta progression they give you is like, say, if you pick up, was it the carbine or something like that, and you use it. That does have perks on it that are locked at first, and as you use the gun, they unlock. So then if you pick up the carbine again, then your gun technically starts out more powerful, but that's a real small thing that's hard to kind of feel early on in the game.
And I feel like that's a good place to also go is just the weapons overall. I only felt like there were maybe I think 3 weapons that I would ever like look forward to getting, and that would be the carbine, of course. Then there was the what was the pulse one?
I talk about
Not a
the Hollow
pulse. It's like
Seeker,
the hollow seeker, and then the bolt one that we got towards the
the
end.
pylon.
Those were the only 3 guns I felt like were the shotgun. I don't see why you. I don't know.
To be fair, like here's the thing, like I think with this game, you kind of mentioned at a certain point, it's hard to feel comfortable experimenting with all the different weapons because you just want to find something that is working for you so you can
Hmm.
progress. I think until that kind of motivation of needing to get to the next room kind of passes, that you're like, okay, let me play around with this shotgun and see what I can do. If I die, whatever, or same thing, because there is definitely some cool guns in here. Like I was using the what is this, like the Dread something, and it's actually really cool, but you don't want to mess around with a gun that you don't know because you're like, well, if I suck at it initially, how am I going to beat this next boss? I want to go with, old faithful carbine or something like that. So that's, I think, the weird thing about this game that's a little tricky, at least initially, is it doesn't help you early on in the game to make easy progression, and it doesn't encourage you to experiment a whole lot until you have beaten the game. So for some people who are never going to get past that first boss because it's so hard, it kind of sucks because if you could just get past that hurdle, like really, I think the game opens up so much when you get to biome 2. You get access to more guns that come
Hmm.
in your weapon pool that you can then use in the first biome.
And then the enemy types change
They
drastically. That
change,
probably has the largest change in terms of enemy types, I would say.
yeah, and the
Maybe
way you
biome
even
two.
like navigate through the biome is different because if it goes to this very narrow corridor kind of situation with biome
Hmm.
one to this
To
open
wide
desert,
open.
yeah, that you can
Mhm.
walk around and stuff. So the game changes a lot when you get to biome two, and in some ways it gets easier. There's still hard parts in there, but people just get stuck at that wall, and I think that sucks. I don't know a good way to kind of recommend somebody to get through that point either. It's just the way the game is kind of structured. But when you do beat it, there's a pretty strong sense of achievement. As I said, when you get to these bosses and you beat them, especially solo, it feels good. And that is the other nice thing about this game is once you do meet one of those milestones, you're good. Like you never have to go back and face the first boss again once you beat him. Same thing with boss 2
Think
and
about
3.
it, but the biomes you can even argue. Sorry to drastic different thought, but the biomes, I guess, to an extent, you could even like put in there as to a representation of the plot and stuff.
Oh
Like
yeah,
one has a very like mystical kind of like biome. One is a very like it feels very alien. It feels like a very basic alien, like kind of in intrigue filled world. And then 2 is like kind of barren and wide open, which you could argue could represent how she is feeling. She's all alone and barren. She has nobody. And then obviously, I mean, the easiest one would be like the ocean one because going into the depths, that's of her sadness and her
well, like her
regrets and
car
everything.
crashed into the river too. That's where
Yeah,
everything kind of ended for. Like,
yeah.
there's definitely some, comparisons and analogies you can make there. Like the game is littered with things that enhance and enforce the narrative, which is really cool if you want to look for it. But
And I will say maybe one thing that playing a co-op kind of affects is I didn't even notice it until watching that video you sent me, but she subtly says a lot throughout the game. And if you're playing
you
co-op, I
miss
did
it.
notice there were some things I missed that he showed in the video, and She talks a lot, and I will say one thing that streaming that I did notice is a chunk throughout the game. I want to say it was towards the might have been towards the ice area, but
Mm,
like she definitely begins to like almost kind of understand what's happening
yeah.
even before the end comes. Um, she kind of just starts rambling and starts muttering and saying things, and it's like I kind of like that for her character because she's not oblivious. She knows that what's going on is not
Yeah.
right. She knows she's she's done this to herself and all that stuff. I don't know. It's very it's a very dark and very it's a very sad story, but
Yeah, no, I agree. And you're right, the tone changes dramatically, I think, when you go into co-op.
oh,
Like,
each biome
well, no, I'm not
changes.
even talking about that.
Or
I'm talking about, like,
yeah.
from playing solo to playing co-op,
Hmm.
the game
Oh yeah, I
feels
get what you're
very
saying.
different. And you're right, if you really want to know or get into this game for the narrative and kind of the environment and immersion, you kind of need to do it solo. Because if you do co-op, you're going to miss stuff, like you're saying. Like, it's still fun and it's still enjoyable, and you'll get kind of the
Hmm.
broad strokes, but there's little details you're gonna miss, and I don't think you're gonna quite pick up on all the nuances this game has. But at the same token, co-op was a lot of fun. As I said, I'm glad I played solo the first time through, but I did really enjoy the co-op run. The gameplay experience changed quite a bit, but it gave me a chance to kind of go back through and really focus on like, okay, now that I know how this game works, I can spend more time figuring out what guns synergize with what parasites and what modifications. I could build a character a little more
Hmm.
often. And it was nice too being able to kind of work with somebody, kind of take down certain enemies, even though I'd beaten before. It was a different feel. So regardless how you play this game, they're gonna be enjoyable experiences. And honestly, if you are stuck early on in the game, the best way to probably get past that hurdle is to play co-op. It's not the game all of a sudden just gets super easy,
Hmm.
but there are some things that help you out. I don't feel like the enemies really got all that much harder when we got into co-op. Like I think they had a
It's
little
a little
more
more
health.
spongy, but that was
Yeah,
about it.
but like their patterns and their behaviors didn't really change. The
No, no,
bosses
no.
felt the same. So besides you needing a few more bullets to take down, the game still played about the same. So having someone else in there to pick you up, which is nice. You basically have someone who can revive you, so you're not just dead as soon as you technically run out of health, which is
Hmm.
nice. So try that if you are stuck. Do yourself a favor, find somebody to help you get through it. It's got, I think, a public matchmaking system, so it's not like you have to even have a buddy. Just
Yeah,
find
it does as a public.
yeah,
Mhm.
host a public thing, have someone pop in, and just let them help you get past that first hurdle. Then maybe go back to solo again to see if you can make some progress, because the game
Hmm.
equips you better, I think, once you get past that first hurdle. But yeah,
I agree. I mean, overall, I would say I personally don't regret playing in co-op. I felt it was just as enjoyable and just as fun, and I don't know. I felt like I got everything I wanted to get out of it.
well, I know too.
I
You're
guess
trying to
just
move on to games a little bit quicker. Like you're not wanting to spend weeks and weeks trying to run. I'm sorry, run through
no,
a game
no.
like this. That especially is gonna be
Mm-mm.
challenging. Like Returnal for me took, man, I'm gonna say probably a month to get through. Now I didn't play it
Really?
every day. Well, I didn't play it every day. Like, I was playing this when I had time, coming home after work or whatnot. I'd play it,
Hmm.
two, maybe three times a week. So by the time I had time to sit down, and, get through major hurdles, it took me probably 3 weeks to I think a month to finally beat it.
Maybe I'm a baby then. I don't know.
Well, I don't know, but I get what you're saying. Like you're trying to work through other games too. Having this kind of just over your head for a month, probably not the most productive thing for especially your channel. So I get that.
Yeah. Um, I guess did you want to branch? Do you want to touch on the Ascension DLC?
Yeah.
What did you think about that? I mean, did you? I mean, for me, I felt like it was fun. I mean, it. I would say it even to an. The parts I enjoyed about it were definitely the cutscenes. But I guess if you don't know, I guess what's even the basis for it? It's just a giant building that
Uh,
is.
yeah, I don't know. There's probably some lore to it. It's the Tower of Sisyphus, which there's more. Was it is Greek, I believe, allegories there. I don't know.
Sisyphus. He's the one with the boulder, right? He's the one known as.
Was
He's in
it? Might have
Hades.
been.
He's in Hades. He's the boulder pusher.
Oh, I think you might be right. I'm gonna look that up
He
real
is.
quick. Sis,
He's like punished by one of the Greek gods, and they make him push a boulder for the rest
I
of his.
think that's yeah, that's right. Which actually
Mhm.
makes sense because the whole thing is about being punished essentially in this
Yeah,
never-ending hellscape. So that's pretty apropos, I suppose.
yeah.
I liked it. At first, when we first started it, I think I felt a little underwhelmed because basically you're put in these relatively tiny little combat rooms, which is very different than most of the game. Like the game does have some, claustrophobic fight areas, but for the most part, you've got kind of an open area you can move around with some cover. And you can kind of use the environment to kind of get the upper hand on the enemies. This is not that case for the most part. You have a pretty small constrained area until you get to later rooms, and it changes the gameplay mechanic a little bit. But after I played more of it, I started to dig it because it did put more emphasis on your skill at the game. And I don't know if I've really elaborated on it, but I love the gameplay in this thing. Like that, honestly, even though I like the story a lot, the graphics are great, performance has so many great pillars of good game design in this for the most part. I loved the gameplay, the quick kind of twitchy like bullet hell shooter, like third person thing. Like I've never played a game like that really. I played bullet hells, but not in this perspective.
Just really thinking about it, it does very much. It is very reminiscent of like a '90s
It's like
SNES
yeah, it's
like
like a shoot 'em
shooter.
up, but a
Yeah,
different
like a shoot 'em
perspective.
up.
Yeah, you mix a third
Which
part
that's what this company House Marquee's known for making, right? Is like '90s shoot 'em ups.
similar. Yeah, they weren't all like that. They always had weird perspective changes,
Hmm.
which was kind of cool. So this is kind of the newest perspective for this style of game they've been working on. But the gameplay I really attached to, especially as I started getting used to how the other systems in the game work, of which there are several. You've got the malfunction stuff, the parasite stuff, all the different
Hmm.
gun perks, and how all that kind of synergizes. So really, all this tower is a focus on those elements. There is some narrative, as you
You gotta
said.
be very careful with how you're utilizing your these gold things. I don't remember what they were called. What are they?
Oh, the little portals that take you to the next area.
No, the currency. You have to like be very careful
Oh, the
because you get
obolites.
some
Yeah,
points
yeah,
with how you spend. You could go for health. You could go for some damage buffs.
yeah. Hmm.
Definitely you can get, what is it? Did we ever mention the astronaut? You can spend it on the
Oh,
astronaut,
yeah.
who, which is like this little toy that you can buy that will revive you if you die, or you can save them. You can. There's even the, oh, I don't remember what it was called. There was a machine that you hop into that grants
Yeah, like
another
Reconstructor or something.
reconstructor. Yeah, there's so much here that you have to make decisions for, and it's very much give and take.
Yeah. What's nice about this tower mode is it very much leans on the arcadey style of the gameplay,
Oh, most
which
definitely.
you probably don't really feel that as much going through the main campaign because you're focusing on the new boss you just have to deal with, or all the stuff flying in your face. But the gameplay lends itself to a quick twitchy arcade style, and this accentuates that because you have a score and multipliers, and it's really just about getting as far and as high as you can up this tower. So at first I felt a little disappointed, but the more I played, the kind of further I got in it, I enjoyed it. I don't know how long I would enjoy it for. Like I know it's endless, so that means at some point you're going to start seeing a lot of repeats. It's just going to be more enemies, stronger enemies, kind of stuff. So at a certain point, I'm sure it'll start feeling a little stale. But
What What did you think about the one boss that you face a couple times? I mean, that it was kind of fun. I
it
mean, I didn't really know who he was supposed to represent. They didn't really say.
no idea. He was a decent boss. I didn't dislike the boss fight. At first, I was a little thrown off because when you fight him the second time, I thought you'd get a brand new boss, but you get the same guy. But it does
Mhm.
unlock new phases. And I only got to the third.
I
Was it
only did
third
the first
phase?
phase. I didn't get that far.
Yeah, I got to the third phase. It was like, yeah, third level, whatever it is. So I fought him for the third time, and
Mhm.
I died, unfortunately, but I got to the end of his third phase. I'm curious because most of the bosses in this game max have three phases. So I'm curious if I did beat him and got to phase four, would he have a new phase after that, or is it just now a repeat of those three phases? Like,
Mhm.
I might have seen just about all this thing has to really show beyond just increasing difficulty, but I could be wrong, as I haven't played any more past that.
I will just say my favorite part by far for the Ascension DLC was, again, more of the cutscene oriented stuff. Like when
Mhm.
you die, the first, at least I only died a few times, but both of the times when you die, there's a table, or a table. Yeah, it's like a
Yeah, it's a
bed
hospital
table or
table.
some hospital table, and you go and sit on it in your main kind of area, and it takes you to a hospital, and you get to, I don't say you get to, you are forced to kind of relive some trauma or some things that were
Mhm.
happening at the hospital. I'm not quite sure where that fit in
So I
because I don't.
think what it's supposed to be in the story, like when she crashes, I think there's a little tidbit saying that basically she gets paralyzed after that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think what you're probably in the hospital right after the car crash.
The car crash.
Because I remember when I watched your cutscene, because you saw two, because I think
Mm-hmm.
you had to run through it twice.
Yeah.
It shows like her broken spine or something like that. So it's either her who's been paralyzed, or it's her mother, because I feel like her mother had the same kind of thing happen to her. Of course, then there's a whole other theory about her mother and her are the same person, or I don't know, something else weird. But that's, I think, what it's alluding to. It's either right after her car crash, or maybe it's when her mother went through her accident, one or the other. It must be after, though, because it talks about, there's like a article I think you pick up that mentions the car crash, doesn't it?
I think so. I think you're right. It mentions the car crash and that she damages her spine or something like
Yeah.
that.
So I think it's probably alluding to that section of, at least narratively.
Hmm.
So
All right. Just
So here's what
thinking.
I'd like
I,
to. I'm sorry. So before we, I don't know if we're shifting gears with this, but there's one more thing I kind of wanted to bring up, because this game, during the year that it came out, ended up on some Game of the Year lists. It didn't end up on all of them, much to my dismay, because I would have put it at the top of
yeah, I
most of
think
them.
Forza won, right, that year. I
It
think Forza won.
depends on which Game of the Year thing you're going by. I think like the Game
IGN is the
Awards.
one I'm thinking. IGN is the one.
I don't remember. Maybe. I don't recall if Horizon did. I know for the Game Awards it was It Takes Two.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about It Takes Two.
So my question, I think we talked about this a little bit, and I want to
Mhm.
expand it, but out of games that year that you either played or that you're familiar with, where would you put Returnal? Remember, there was stuff like Forza Horizon, It Takes Two, Halo
Halo.
Infinite, Resident Evil Village. I'm pretty sure was that year.
Yeah, it was very early in the year.
Yeah, this was 2021.
Um, that's an interesting question because I'll say it again. When I initially, if you watch my stream, when we initially beat the game, I was kind of down on the
Hmm.
ending, and I feel like at that point I probably would have gave it like, I don't know. I'll throw a score on there. I feel like I wanted to give it something like a 7, which is seven's good. That's like I enjoyed it. This is a fun game. You should
Sure.
try it. Um, but after watching that video you sent me, which really kind of that video doesn't really give any definitive answers, but it just
It
kind of
recontextualizes
it
it a little bit.
recontextualizes everything that like it's whatever you want it to be, or it's how you kind of take anything, how you look at the context, and
Well, it added an interesting
yeah,
context to it. Like, I think a lot of it was probably pretty spot on, at least as far as how I interpret the game. But even for the stuff I didn't agree with, I liked that someone could take this and add that much extra kind of depth or meaning and draw conclusions with other, forms of media and literature. So, and we'll try to find that video and link it in the
actually
description.
I literally just looked it up. I'll give it a shout out. It's a video called "Returnal is a Hell of Our Own Creation" by Jacob Geller.
Hmm.
So maybe after this, when we post the podcast, I'll post a link to it. So if anyone wants to check it out, I'll put it down in the description and you can check it out. But yeah, so great video. Thank you, Jacob. I felt like you really you
Yeah, you
really
gotta
changed my
subscribe from
opinion on.
me. Yeah.
Maybe I should. I don't know if I did that.
You
But
gotta
yeah,
support YouTubers. You're, a fancy YouTuber. You should be encouraged and subscribes. And of course, if you haven't already, listening to this podcast, go down to the bottom and click the subscribe and like and comment and all. See, I'm better at this job than you are. This should be my
no.
channel. I'm just kidding.
Maybe it should.
I'm sorry.
I'll just phase myself out. I'll send myself down into the eternal depths.
Here we go. I'm just gonna
Um,
take your face off the chat. Let's see. Where is your picture? And there we go.
Photoshop me out.
Hi, everybody. This is now the I'm sorry, the Phoenix Man podcast. Welcome to a better rendition of. No, just kidding. All right.
Well, I'll have you know, an important part of having a channel is routinely and frequently having time to create content. Just so you know, I don't know
Oh
if you
yeah.
know
Well,
that.
I probably bombed that portion of it. Sorry.
But I guess just real yeah, back to I would say I gave it a 7 before watching Jacob Geller's video,
Mm-hmm.
but I would say his video piece for me, I would say boosted me a point. So I would give this like an 8 out of 10, where it's like definitely a must play, definitely something that again, I don't know if I want to go back to and play immediately, but it is a game that whenever I think about it, I will immediately have. That's it. I'll think about it. This is
Mm-hmm.
a game I will think about a lot every time it's brought up, which I like. I
Yeah.
like stuff that is thought provoking, and
There's only a few games that I come back to and I really think about the narrative very often. Like this is one. I don't know if you ever played a game called Soma. I'm pretty sure it's PC
Mhm.
exclusive. I highly recommend that. Actually, that would be a
Camera.
really cool stream. It's kind of a thrillery, you could say it's a horror game, but I don't know if it really is. But that story is extremely intense. But I'm not going to go down that route. But yeah, this is within a handful of games that I think, will think about,
Hmm.
long term after the game and the credits have already rolled.
But yeah, back to your other question, I would say, yeah, I would say this would be my game of the year for that year. Um, Halo Infinite was fun, but looking back on it, it was fun because we played a lot of the content
Hmm.
together in terms of multiplayer, and then maybe that game could have gotten a bump up if they would have had co-op to start, but seeing as how it didn't,
Yeah, that was
that
my
really kind of
problem.
hurt that.
The game just had so much missing potential when it first came out. Like, we enjoyed the multiplayer for what it was. We enjoyed the store
Mhm.
or the campaign for what it was, but it was just missing too much. It's still missing so much. And honestly, like, I'm not gonna come back and think about Halo Infinite in a year or two, and I
No,
probably
I'm
won't
not.
come back and play it too. I'll play whatever the successor is to it. I will think about Returnal, and I don't feel like Returnal was lacking anything. Like, everything this game tried and could have done, it did. Halo did not. It definitely reached for a lot, but it missed quite a bit as well.
I would. I just thought about an interesting comparison, but this game really, Returnal really reminded me. Do you ever get to watch the remake or the early 2000s, the Mist movie? Did you ever get to watch
Yes,
this?
yeah.
This very much reminded me of that. Not wholly, but I just mean in like primarily just kind of the
The
atmosphere and the
feel and the tone, yeah.
feel. And then at that ending,
Hmm.
when like that ending, do you remember the ending? It's so
A little
bad.
bit. It's been so long, man. I don't remember much.
The ending is that, oh gosh, I don't want to ruin it for people, but the ending is that they get away in the car, and
That's right.
the monsters are coming in on them, and let's just say the dad attempts to free his children of pain and agony of what could be coming, and then that doesn't come. It's horrible.
Yeah, yeah,
It's a
okay,
really
yeah.
sad
Oof.
story.
Very sad.
Yeah. But yeah, so I guess I'll give it ChazmaN's 8 out of 10. This is definitely a must play,
So, it'd be your
especially
favorite
if,
game for 2021.
yes, I
I
would
want to
say so.
extend the question because you played more games since then. So, out of the
Hmm.
games that came out this year, is there anything you like better? Not the games that you just played this year, because some of the games you played this year are older. Like, I know
You
you
mean
wanted to
just
say,
came out this year?
yeah, like new games. Like, I know you played Plague's Tale, but that's what,
That's
two, three,
2019.
yeah,
2019.
and a few others. So, new games that you've played within the past 2 years now that you think is better than this game.
Within the past 2 years, it's tough. I mean, when did Hades come out? Is that 2019 as well?
I think that was 19 or 20.
Okay, if that was 19, then that would exclude that. Um, I'd have to see if I like this more than Arceus. Arceus was fun, but I would say I like this more than Arceus. This is
Yeah.
definitely more of a thought-provoking story, even though that was kind of
This
dumb
is a better
fun.
game than Arceus.
It's a
Like,
better game than Arceus.
Arceus
Yeah,
is
I agree.
fun, and it was, nice because Pokemon had gotten so stale. But even playing Arceus, when I was playing it, I would never said this game is the best game ever. Like, it was really fun for what it was if you're a Pokemon fan, but that's about it. Like, I don't think I'll ever go back and play Arceus. I'll be playing
Hmm.
whatever the newer Pokemon is, perhaps, or I'll fall off again from the franchise altogether.
So I guess after looking, I'm just going back. I would say the only thing that I would pull out of there that would make me, I really enjoyed Guardians of the Galaxy.
Okay, that's
Really
fair.
enjoyed that. That was very dumb fun, but that was just like, I don't know. I feel like that was the only, maybe I'm just looking. That's maybe the only other title I could like pull out and be like, okay, this and this.
Yeah, and I could understand that point. Like, I like Guardians a lot. Like, that game looked really
Hmm.
good. It was written really well, voice acted. Like, the only thing that really stumbled for me with that game is the gameplay was just okay. Like, the gameplay, which for me and for most games is usually what I'm kind of focusing on. I mean, narrative can win me over, but the gameplay there was just a
I
little
also played
lacking.
Skyward Sword too, the
Yeah, but
remake
yeah,
2021.
but I still don't count that as a new game. I mean, yeah. Oh, that's good. I wonder if I'd, because I like Skyward Sword a lot. Um, I think I like Returnal more than Skyward Sword.
Really?
Maybe, I don't know. Because here's the thing, I like Skyward Sword probably more than most when it comes to Zelda games, but I can definitely recognize its shortcomings, and I think I recognized them and felt them a little more when I replayed it. Um,
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. That I'd have to go back and forth on that one a little bit, but Returnal for me ranks pretty high.
So since I gave it a score, why don't you give it a score? What would you say, a
I'm gonna say a
9?
9. Yeah, I mean, I don't think
9?
it's perfect, and I mean, I'm talking this game up a lot. It's not like this is, I think, the most amazing game ever. There's definitely games I would probably put above and beyond it in some ways, but I really enjoyed my time with it. It's definitely a game I'm going to think about and probably come back and play in a year, maybe sooner than that for some quick runs. That's the nice thing about it. This game really facilitates itself to have some quick run-throughs if you just want to
Mm-hmm.
re-experience it. Like similar to something like Hades. You could hop on for an hour or two, have some fun with it, move on. You know, you feel like you may have gained a little bit or at least, didn't waste your time.
And I'll throw my opinion out that I threw out for Plague Tale as well. Like where I said, in my opinion, a Plague Tale is if you have something like Game Pass, that's one you kind of have to play, in my opinion. I would say the same thing for this. I would say if you have, because I have the PlayStation, Plus Premium. If you have any of those higher tiers where you can get an access to this game, I think this is a must play. I think especially if you're not paying any additional money, I would say try it out at least,
Yeah.
and if you don't like it solo, then again try it out with in co-op, and then if not, then you're SOL.
Yeah.
But
You said something too after we beat this game the other day. Like, you said I think you liked Astro's Playroom more than Returnal. Is that still true?
I I really liked Astros. And
Better than Returnal? Better than this? Like,
I
what?
would say no. I would say Astro's Playroom was fun because it was short and it was cutesy and I enjoyed it. But I definitely like. I think I like this more than it. But Astro
Astro's
I
was
would.
good. Just it had nowhere near the depth of Returnal, in my
No, it
opinion.
doesn't. I agree.
The
I like
nostalgia is
this
a lot
one.
of fun, though. I will give you that. Like
Mhm.
going through and locking all the old PlayStation hardware is a cool thing.